Welcome to another episode of A Come Together. And we are back. Another week, another episode of Come Together. I'm sorry that it's so late into the week that I'm posting this first episode, recording this first episode. This week was genuinely a slog for me to make my way through so far. A lot of introspection, a lot of thought. I have a lot on my mind, and then what happens is if I don't find a way to kind of cleanly get it out, or speak it out, or write it out, then it kind of just sits in my head and festers, and I haven't had the opportunity to. It's just been so busy to really get my thoughts out, or a lot of my thoughts, and I do have a lot of them coming up. That I'm going to talk about now, and I have an episode that I hope to be recording later on tonight as well with a guest, and some more guests coming up soon. Again, like I mentioned, I think in the last episode, in the last solo episode, we have more guests coming on, but as I get more and more outside the realm of just my buddies and just my friends, it takes a little bit more planning and a little bit more working on a time crunch, and so I've kind of got to find that balance between having guests that are my buddies and finding the time to have guests that don't know me but are more professional and expand into other areas that I'm not well read about or educated about or even necessarily aware about at all. And we got some. I got some very exciting people that I'm really excited to record with, and I guess we'll just have to see what happens. Um, Anyway, that is just the beginning. I have a lot of thoughts today. I have a lot of thoughts in general, and I wasn't even sure really which direction this episode was going to go because I didn't know what it was that I was going to start talking about that was going to really catch me and get me going. And one of the first things that I was thinking about was one of the first things I was thinking about is actually education in terms of my future family, because I listened to a couple of podcasts this week or in the last week or two, and they were on the Sean Ryan show. And Sean Ryan is, at least to me, an enormously impressive person. I think he's awesome. I think he has an incredible story. I think that he has shown enormous skill um, and discipline, to really take it to face his demons head on. He's open about it. He talks about it, and it's really scary to say things on the record that could, at the very least, risk your well-being and your ability to make money and your ability to have a channel and to and spreading news that kind of goes against the official narrative, and and he's doing it, and he's fighting, and he's doing and he's having all the hard conversations, and I can't like I can't imagine. I can't imagine because I used to be afraid while I was single and while I was dating. I used to be terrified of any kind of negative interactions with any kind of girls that they didn't know me, and that we wouldn't have some kind of long-term lasting relationship. This could just be a couple of dates or just meeting up or whatever it is. And Um, and I was always afraid to, you say the wrong thing or you put the wrong, like you think, you're afraid that someone's going to take something and twist it out of context. And while you hope that people are better than that, a lot of people aren't. And I used to be terrified just to even have regular conversation. I was very, I don't know, terrified, but I was very, very paranoid about the things that I would text and the conversations that I would have, and the way that I would talk to people, because I always knew that it could come back. It was on the record, like potentially forever. I guess I started off with ex of mine, who whenever we would have an argument, I realized that people actually do this. I thought this was pretty crazy, but have an argument, she would screenshot our argument, and then in the future, whenever we would argue again, she would send me screenshots of the previous arguments that we had to emphasize the point that you know, I'm an asshole and this is an isolated incident, whatever it is. And, by the way, at times I really was an asshole, and times, I really, no one's perfect, and including myself. And also, I'm a super strong believer in very few, um, texting rarely does a good job smoothing over fights or communicating heated emotions or passionate conversations. Texting is usually an awful venue for that. And so I've come to realize, from that A, not to text serious conversations or anything that really needs to be, discussed or spoken out in person, and B, to just be aware of the thing that things I put in writing could come back to haunt me. And so when Sean Ryan talks to the people he talks to, and he publicizes agendas that put him at risk, both in terms of actual safety and in terms of his ability to continue his podcast and his show. Um, it's really, really incredible, and I really want to emphasize my support for that and support for him, because it requires an enormous amount of bravery and potential self-sacrifice, and really willing to put yourself on the line for everyone and for the truth. And that's something that it's scary, and I think a lot more people would be inclined to say that they would be those kind of people, but when push comes to shove, it's really just a very few brave souls that are willing to do this. So, and he has on a lot of guests, and he has a lot of really great quality guests. And one of the people that I find that I listen to, who I keep on flip flopping on what I think about him, and I actually think it's probably good and it's probably on purpose, is Vivek Ramaswamy. And the guy is clearly, super brilliant, and he's clearly beyond capable. And and he has, and he's got a personality to match with the brains. And so he likes to spitball ideas based on the combination of, I guess, brashness or confrontation and kind of being just having an aggressive attitude or composure is an aggressive composure is is enough to kind of be off-putting to a lot of people, and I really understand that. He had some really interesting ideas when they were talking about education, though, and public education, and he was talking about how teachers aren't incentivized to, to be great teachers, and we don't compensate them enough, and we're kind of weeding out the good teachers. And while it is a conversation that we all know exists and we all know happens, um, we don't ever really have an answer, because education is so deeply ingrained in all aspects of society. School directly translates to college. College directly translates to jobs a lot of the time. Or college directly translates to research. Or jobs directly translate to, to whether or not you're able to get a line of credit, and whether you're able to expand and build your own business. And you have to and at the root of all of this is education system, where if you don't have these papers to start, then it's extremely difficult to get anything done in your life, really. Um, and then he also had on, just this past week, and I highly, highly recommend going and listen to it, Just for I don't know that I necessarily agree with everything that this guy is doing and saying, but this guy, I think his name is Lucky Palmer, the person that founded Oculus, worked for Facebook, uh, and now is working on developing military technology. And a big chunk of his podcast was talking about the way that he grew up. And one of the things that he gives a lot of credit to when it comes to his originality and his education and his ability to get things done and function outside of the system is the fact that he was homeschooled, and that a homeschool education really allowed him to flourish. And you're thinking just to think about how that happened, because I feel like there's always trade-offs. And I'm someone that, aside from having my own criticisms about the school system, I personally didn't have such a great experience with it for the most part. I loved high school, or I loved the second half of high school. I loved the second 2 years of high school, and but I was never able to really be good at it. And then I noticed that my education when I was in community college was far superior um, to the education that I was getting in Binghamton. And not to say, yeah, I'm sorry, when I say this, I'm talking about the perspective of how much I've learned in class from my teachers as a direct correlation to how good the teachers are and how much I learned. Community college, which obviously is not as prestigious by any stretch of the imagination, almost something that people have a tendency to gloss over. If you say, "Oh, where'd you go to school?" Most of the time, people don't proudly say, "Oh, I went to community college," even though I don't think that there's any kind of shame in that. Most people don't like to talk about it. I love talking about it because I had such a great experience. Um, and I went to upstate New York called Rockland Community College, which is about half an hour, 45 minutes north of Manhattan. I did a semester there. I did a semester and a half. I actually met, it's crazy, I met my future grandfather-in-law, my wife's grandfather, who my son is named after. Um, he was my first college teacher for the first college class I ever took in the winter course of 2014. It was January 2014, I believe, and maybe going into 2015, maybe January 2015, so just the beginning of 2015. And we learned sociology, and one of the first things we talked about was free speech. And one of the first things, and this guy is an Orthodox Jew, and one of the first things that we talked about in that class was his was the absolute commitment to free speech, to the extent, and one of the big things that we talked about was the infamous Nazi march on Skokie. And and we had a whole class conversation, debate, and then papers about whether or not this was something that should be allowed. Should Nazis be allowed to gather and express their opinions, and and talk about how Hitler was right and all these things? And and whether or not that was, whether he left the question of morality out of it. He said, okay, put morals aside for a second, just in terms of free speech, should this be allowed? And it was really interesting, and it was really, really, and that really opened my eyes. Um, but they were talking about the education system, and this guy Lucky Palmer, I think it's his name. I'm going to be saying it wrong the whole time. Said, I'm actually going to pull it up right now, so make sure I'm not butchering the whole thing. But he said that he gives an enormous amount of credit to being homeschooled. And I know a couple other people. I have a couple other friends that are homeschooled as well. And one of the downsides, obviously, people say is how um, is the social aspect, is the aspect of how are you sure that your kid is going to learn social graces and interact with other kids, and are they going to be a step behind developmentally when it comes to their social acuity. And these are really legitimate questions, and they're really worth thinking about. But on the other end of the spectrum, all the things that are the problems with classes, darn it, Palmer Lucky is his name, not Lucky Palmer, Palmer Lucky. um, but anyway, and the things that you benefit, you're not being forced to sit behind a desk behind a desk for 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, and you're not stuck in a room with a teacher that potentially, likely, is not a great teacher, and isn't so interested. It doesn't have, and looks at the job like a job and not the job of education like education. And and there's so many resources out now. There's so many podcasts, so many YouTube videos, so many classes, so many creative ways to learn and to process information and to arm ourselves with with whatever it is we're passionate about. It doesn't just have to be English. It could be English in the realm of screenwriting, creative writing. It could be history through the context of making history documentaries and plays about historical events that happen, to show like how you process information and show how much information that you know and how much you've learned. And when it comes to science, to build things. When it comes to engineering, to build things. When it comes to coding, like to start designing games, to start designing websites for yourself at a young age. Show yourself that this is something. What the other problem I think with school is that school is always teaching us that what we can't do and what we have to wait for and what we have to learn more for, and don't even try things until we learn more. Don't bother talking to me until you finish high school. Don't even bother talking to me until you finish college. Don't even bother talking to me until you finish your master's, your PhD, or go to or your doctorate, right? Or go to med school or whatever it is, right? Or until you're a lawyer. Don't even talk to me until you have 10 years of experience, until you're a specialist in X, Y, and Z. By the time anyone is able to have any kind of opinion or has the license to really do anything, you're in your 30s. It's crazy, and perhaps this is part of the perhaps is part of the cause of the delayed adolescence that we're experiencing, where people consider themselves adolescents or children or irresponsible for longer and longer. And I don't know that that necessarily is doing our society a favor. And I don't know that I'm necessarily advocating for homeschool, but I'm really thinking more and more about it, especially because I'm an Orthodox Jew, and Jewish school is a fortune. Generally speaking, between $20,000 and $35,000 a year per kid. And on one hand, you know, uh, education really, of course, education matters, and the system works, or at least the system, the world that we live in is built around the system. On the other hand, the things that my future family can learn from learning how to build things and break things and fix things and learning how to take the initiative, which is something that I'm pretty good at, but I really could be a lot better at. And something that I would really, 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 really like to, I think I would like to not only, you know, infuse in my own family, but I'd like to infuse that kind of sense of go do it yourself, go seize the day to my students. But they're just told by everyone around them all the time that they're not able to, they're too young, they shouldn't do it yet. And and unfortunately, it is doesn't I think that it kind of cripples us, and it kind of cripples our creativity, our ability to succeed, our ability to break the mold. And indeed, we live in a world, I think, where the mold is the most important thing, and you don't break the mold breaks you. You don't break the mold, you don't create a new shape, a new footstep for people to walk in. You have to squeeze your footstep into the one that came before you. And while I think there are certain things that you do, and actually there's a constant pu- you know get tug of war going on between preservation of values and breaking borders, and seeing what needs to be knocked down. It's kind of it's similar to how I've read the way that Elon um, runs his companies or heads his companies. He will he'll look at he'll strip everything down in a way and say, what are the absolutely integral things that we can't function without, and everything else goes in the garbage. Let's figure out a way to make it better. And I kind of think that that's the way that we have to look at things. I think we have to look at school like that. I think we have to look at work like that. I think we have to look at life like that. Like, what are the absolute, especially when it comes to making progress, and I hope that America and the world is entering a new age. We talked about this. I talked about this in the last solo episode, where I'm feeling so hopeful for the future because it feels like we're at a new age where we're breaking down institutions, and now there's a massive vacuum. There's a vacuum of power and information and perspective, and it's kind of just there to fill, and and everyone is following different footsteps, and they're following different leaders. And on one hand, it's super chaotic. There's no question about it, because we can't even find a universally trusted source of truth, which is a shame. And it literally just and it's just about whoever you consume, and whatever you think, whatever you put together in your head that makes the most sense to you, that it seems the most rational, you kind of go with. And it's weird. There's a it's a weird time. It's a weird culture to be a part of. It's a weird society that, I can be absolutely certain of something, and someone else could be absolutely certain of the exact opposite thing, and both of us have equally reputable sources that we're quoting and that we're saying. Um, I don't know equally, but I I would imagine, if you take away my bias, it's probably pretty equal. That our sources are pretty equally valid. Um, and it's just really interesting. It's really interesting what needs to, and I think that that right now, with Elon loose in the government and Elon loose all over the place, I actually think that applying his philosophy on a big scale, listen, there will be mistakes, and there won't, and not everything will turn out perfect, but I think that it'll do a lot more good than bad. I think that there'll be a lot more to benefit and to gain as a society from trying to strip away from the things that seem to be extra and superfluous, and and straight up unreasonable, and they're just in existence because they exist. And I think it's good to break these things up. I think that everyone has to do that, within their own personal lives, and kind of examine and take a look at the things that they do on a regular basis, how they spend their time, how they invest their efforts, and say what could be stripped away, what is essential, what I want to build, what I want to do, what I want to do with my life. And actually, this kind of gets to another idea. I've been bringing up the Ayn Rand a lot recently because I'm reading this biography about her. But one thing that she writes, that I found myself, I mean, it was phrased so beautifully, and it's a sentiment that means a lot to me. Um, is there's two types of people. There's people that look at accomplishment. In order for people to feel success, there's two types of people there's two different types of success take that people seek out, that they look for. One of them is other people's approval. And so success does not lie in a particular project, or a particular goal, or a particular experience, or a particular form of self-expression, but success lies in validation and approval from society around you. And then there are the people that success is measured by the things that they've built and the things that they've done. And the people that kind of measure success by the things they build and do are people that are incentivized to continue building, because they get the reward for having accomplished what they're looking for. And it's not human nature, I don't think, to just be satisfied. I think that we could and I've talked to Ari, my friend Ari Mendelo, about this a lot. We talk about the difference between being satisfied and or rather being content and being happy, and obviously there are different degrees in which you could be content or happy or feel like your life is accomplished or successful. And then there's other degree, and then there's degrees where you're like, okay, well, I'm kind of just doing good enough, and I'm doing fine, and I'm okay with this for now. And and you don't want to, I think for your own sanity, you can't spend your entire life in either camp. I think for your own sanity, if you just spend your entire life doing just enough and getting through, then that's a travesty, and you're probably not going to I don't know how, I don't, I mean, I don't know, I don't know how people, I don't know how people are satisfied with that. And perhaps someone could explain it to me. But, uh, I think that people that live like that tend to live like that more because, oh, well, it's better than the alternative. The alternative is not, is being in trouble or being scared or taking risks or putting myself in a position where I may not succeed. And I don't want that. So the better alternative would be to go ahead and just lower my bar and be satisfied. And then there are the people that are constantly looking to create things and looking to you know accomplish projects and solve puzzles and fix things up and tweak things and express themselves. And the problem is that I kind of fall into that camp, I think. But when I have a tendency to bite off more than I could chew, and so and so I have burnouts like this week. I mean, it is Wednesday, and typically I start recording and making plans for my podcast on Sunday, or even as early as the previous week, and I was so burnt out from balancing everything in my life that I really even couldn't think about the podcast until today. So I apologize about that. I was thinking a lot about music recently too, and I was thinking because I was talking to a couple of friends of mine who were talking about Springsteen, and and I think I was talking to Dee, maybe he was on the podcast, and we are talking about how much Springsteen's music meant to me, and how much of myself I saw in it, and and I went. It was 2023. My wife was expecting with our oldest, um, with our son. And Springsteen started his first tour since 2017, in America since 2016. His first tour since 2017. So he didn't go on tour 2018 or 19. He was going to go on tour, I believe, 2020 when COVID hit, and then he put out a couple albums. And then the first time I was able to see him was 2023. And until this point, I'd spent, without exaggerating, I think 6 or 7 years, five, maybe between 5 and 7 years of my life. I listened to Springsteen, I think, in 2017. Um, whew, five, 5 to 7 years of listening to his music almost every day, um, several hours a day typically. And my writing was similar to his writing, and he was essentially most of the music that I was listening to, and I was just soaking in this young Springsteen. I listened to the live concerts, and his concerts were really where he excelled the most, because he would just perform and he would just light up the stage. He would channel all the emotions, all the out of control emotions that he was feeling and experiencing at all times. He would channel that into the highs and lows of a concert. The upbeat music, the slower music, the sad songs, the happy songs, the love songs, the heartbreak, and he could just manifest that, and you could hear it and you could feel it in the recording. It's really amazing. And if you have an opportunity, I think Apple or Spotify, they both have some live concerts. Um, I mean, the earlier ones from the 70s and the 80s are definitely more interactive. Springsteen, tells stories about growing up and tells stories about how he used to feel about things, and about why, the inspirations of different songs and the different people that he would meet along the way on the road. And you just sense that this was just like this, like, I have such a hard time doing this. I feel like he's another level of human, but he's not. Like, he just is a human, and and I hung on to every word and every recording like it was gospel, like it was prophecy. And because he embodied so much, like he found a way. He was young and around my age at the time, and my age now, really. And he embodied just like the same kind of desire for finding self that I had, that I was experiencing. And then I got married. I started dating my wife, actually. When I started dating my wife, my life started taking a little bit of a different direction. The question now wasn't about what am I going to do with myself? Who is it that who's going to be my partner forever? What am I going to find with myself? What am I going to find in my life? The question instead became, how do I process all these big changes that are coming up? How do I prepare myself for the responsibilities that are coming up, and how do I do the best job with them? And overnight, and actually at that point, I essentially just kind of switched off and just stopped listening to, like, something like a flip just switched to my head, and I just stopped listening to him. This was 2021, 22, 21, 22, end of 21, early 22. And and I went to, but I was still, I didn't really, I didn't really understand this change. I didn't understand this shift. It actually took me 2 or 3 years to even recognize it. It's 2025 now. I've only come to this realization a couple of weeks ago, and this started 3 or 4 years ago. And but when I saw that Springsteen was going on tour, and even though I hadn't listened to a lot of his music until now, in the recent year or two, I still had to go. He was playing in Tampa, opening night, and we signed up, we got tickets, and then we went to the show, and the show was, it was surreal, it was incredible, but it was also, um, I don't want to say a letdown because it wasn't, but it was far different than what I was anticipating, imagined, had dreamed about, was hoping for, because the recordings that I would listen to, that I spent so many hours, so many conscious hours, just absolutely just taking in like a sponge. I mean, I could tell you, if you asked me any tour, or any year, you even play a live version of a song, and I could probably tell you within 30 seconds what tour that was, what tour that song, that recording took place on. Whether it was the 80s, whether it was the 70s, whether it was what album he was touring, what, you can even just tell the difference in his voice and how he was singing. And then when I go to this concert, and I go to this concert, and I want to give him all the credit in the world because he deserves all the credit in the world. He played for 3 hours, or 2.5, 3 hours, and he had an amazing compilation of old music and new music, and he did a really good job balancing the two. But it felt it felt like a tribute show. It felt like it felt like a tribute show for a couple of reasons. It felt like a tribute show because of the audience, because what I imagine that the audience would, well, what I imagined myself in the audience was older, of course, and on a, I mean, when you think about it, it obviously makes a lot of sense. I mean, how many 15 to 35-year-olds know Springsteen, listen to Springsteen on a regular basis? How many 15 to 35-year-olds are going out of their way to listen to the records and get that sleeve with the lyrics and follow along and understand what he was speaking to, and and soak in not just the music as the music, but the lyrics and the music together as a symphony, to express the pain of trying to discover ourselves, or the excitement, enthusiasm for the future, when you know that when you know that you're on top of the world, and you know the whole world's just your oyster, in your hand, in the palm of your hand, and you could do whatever you want to seize it. And if the crowd was filled with people that were thirsting for that were looking for that were listening to the songs and hearing their own lives and their own existential questions being expressed and articulated and played out in front of them, that would have been an incredible experience in and of itself. But Springsteen himself is, is almost playing these songs like a tribute to his younger self. And he has the sense of someone that is comfortable, and he has a sense of someone that is not, it's not driven by fear of failure and inadequacy. He's not driven by that. And instead, it almost feels like Springsteen became the Springsteen and the E Street Band and the crowd became a tribute to them, to an earlier version of themselves. And I'm not saying this as a negative thing. I'm not saying this to trash Springsteen, to trash his crowd, to trash his audience. I just don't think that it was the experience that I was looking, that I had imagined. I was nostalgic for a time that no longer exists and that I did not exist in. And it gave me a lot to think about. It gave me a lot to think about because this was something that I had planned for a long time. Anyone that knew me at the time knew I was absolutely obsessed, knew that I kept him on a pedestal. And, there's something about the young person's journey to try to discover themselves and the rawness of the emotions that they're feeling, and the feeling of unsettledness. And I was actually talking to a student about this yesterday. I had a student that came up to me in the school, and he professed, which I give him a lot of credit for. It's very hard to do in a school like this, which is an Orthodox all boys school. Um, when I say far right, I don't mean politically, but religiously to the right. And he told me that he was having philosophical a philosophical crisis of sorts, and he's in 12th grade. And there's a couple of things that I thought. Number one was, I'm so happy that there's 12th graders that are thinking about things in serious ways. I felt terrible for him because I understand the feeling of being part of a world and a bubble, but also feeling like you yourself are separate from it and somehow outside of it, even though that's all you know and all you are is on the inside of it. And he and I sat down for about an hour yesterday, and we're talking. We're talking about the basis of his belief. We're talking about, I asked him what he believes the purpose of, like, what's the point of religion? What's the point of God? What's the point of all this stuff? And what he believes the point is, what I believe the point is. What the difference is between truth and history. And whether to take these stories as truth or history that happen. And we say they're true, but we also say that, at least, from the Jewish perspective, rather, we say that the Torah, the Bible, the Old Testament, the Bible is true, but we also say it's not a history book. And so, you kind of say, well, then what does that mean, and what the implications are for that. And one of the things that I told him was, like, listen, this I was like, I know you feel lost. I know that you feel, I know that it's not a good feeling to feel like you're different than everyone else around you and you feel like you're the only one that's thinking this. And I was like, it's good to ask these questions. I was like, there's certain universal rules and principles that kind of apply everywhere, right? That relationships create bonds, and bonds that are extremely difficult to break, right? You can apply that in a chemical way, you can apply that in a scientific way, you can apply that in a relationship way. You can apply that in friendship, you can apply that in music. The bond that you get from a band playing together as opposed to a solo performance is going to be a very different experience. And so one of the other universal rules is that enormous amounts of pressure create value. That when a lot of pressure, and pressure could, some people perceive pressure to also equal pain. When there's an enormous amount of pressure applied, when you come out of the other side of that and you make it through, you come out a lot greater and a lot stronger and a lot more beautiful and valuable. The same way that diamonds are made, in the same way that evolution happens, in the same way that that you have all these great creatives that are sensitive souls that are feel lost and feel disconnected, and then the only way that they know how to express themselves is through poetry and music, and they create all this incredible music from the age of like 15 to 30 typically. Like after 30, I think most people, I mean, typically speaking, kind of drop off in terms of like these gems that they create, these poetic and these poetic anthems of pain and hope and love and loss and tragedy and heartbreak. This happens when you feel the most. And I told him, I was like, it is good that you're experiencing this, and it's good that you're asking questions, and it's good that you're looking to have conversations about this. I was like, because you're going to end up on the other side. I was like, you're going to end up on the other side, and you're going to end up being far more thoughtful, have far more of an authentic relationship with whatever philosophy or perspective you end up living with, because by the time you get there, this isn't something that was given to you. This is something that you've made and you've created for yourself. And and then you continue that tradition and you allow the space for the future to do that as well. And this kind of, this ties back together with that whole Springsteen idea, because, I don't know how many other people have, that are my age or around my age that have had their lives transformed by him. But even me, you know, I think that for the purpose of my journey, this was absolutely necessary. And the fact that he's still performing and that I went to his show and I was able to say, oh, it's a tribute to the American journey. It's a tribute to the human spirit. It's a tribute because this guy's already made it, and this crowd already lived probably majority of their lives at this point, right? But what they but what they're gathering for and what they're spreading, what they're emphasizing is for everyone to kind of find their own path and figure out their own way and figure out their own journey. And when I was talking to my student about this, I said the same thing. I said, you're, it while it hurts more to ask these tough questions, as much as it hurts, it's going to be enormously beneficial for you one day. And it's going to be sooner than you think. And yeah, I think that we'd be very lucky if we lived in a world where more people were setting themselves out to achieve themselves and not be satisfied with just kind of following along with whatever bubble it is that we grew up in and whatever bubble it is. And even if you end up with the same results, and even if you end up living the same lifestyle, I end up living a remarkably similar lifestyle to one that I lived 10, 15, 20 years ago. But my whole lifestyle has changed. My attitude has changed. The way I look at life has changed. My perspective, the amount of effort that I put into things. My personality has developed. My behavioral habits have become healthier just in search of something else and even or something new or my own place within this world. And even though it was already and even though I end up living very similarly, it's a totally different life. And I hope to be able to kind of help him and help more students figure this out. Um, so those are just some of my thoughts for now. I'm going to do another episode. I hope tonight. At least one more episode for this week. Hopefully two. And again, hope to come back with you guys and to you guys with some more fun guests out of the box. And really excited about the future. So bye everyone. Love you all, and until tomorrow.